Captain Jake Morrison had been drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. The bridge of the UES Defiance turned red with warning lights as his crew scrambled to their stations. Through the main window, space itself seemed to tear open like fabric being ripped apart. "Captain, we have massive energy readings," called out Lieutenant Amy Brooks from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. "Something big is coming through." Jake set down his cup and moved to the center of the bridge. He had been a soldier for 20 years, fighting pirates and rebels across the outer colonies. He thought he had seen everything the galaxy could throw at humanity. He was wrong. The first ship that came through the tear in space was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was black as the void between stars, covered in spikes and weapons that glowed with alien energy. Behind it came another ship, then another, then dozens more. Each one was large enough to carry a small city inside its hull. "Get me Admiral Carter at Luna Command," Jake ordered. His hand stayed steady as he watched more alien ships pour into Earth's solar system. "Tell her we have visitors." The alien fleet spread out like a net around Earth. Their ships moved without sound through the vacuum, taking positions that would let them attack from every direction. Jake counted at least 50 of the massive vessels, each one armed with enough firepower to level a continent. On Luna Base, Admiral Lisa Carter was already in the command center when Jake's message arrived. She had been watching the long-range sensors for hours, tracking the strange energy buildup at the edge of the solar system. Now she knew what it meant. "All ships battle stations," she commanded into her communication device. "This is not a drill." The human fleet was small compared to what was coming at them. Earth had 12 major warships, Mars had 6, and the outer colonies could manage maybe 20 more between them. Against 50 alien dreadnoughts, it looked like bringing knives to a gunfight. Dr. Chris Hamilton ran into the command center, his lab coat still smoking from whatever experiment he had been working on. "Admiral, I'm getting readings I've never seen before. These ships are using technology that shouldn't be possible." "Explain it in simple terms, Doctor," Lisa said, not taking her eyes off the tactical display. "They're bending space itself to move. Their weapons channel energy from their engines directly into their guns. And their shields." Chris shook his head. "Our missiles won't even scratch them." The largest alien ship moved toward Earth, its black hull reflecting the light of the sun like dark metal. As it approached, a signal came through on all human communication channels. The voice that spoke was cold and reptilian, with words that seemed to hiss between sharp teeth. "Primitive species of the third planet," the voice began. "I am High Commander Vexthar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your system now belongs to us." On Earth, President Helen Brooks was in an emergency meeting with her advisors when the message came through. Every screen in the room showed the same image: a tall, lizard-like creature with red eyes and scales that shifted color in the light. His uniform was covered in symbols that probably meant victories over other worlds. "You will provide tribute to the Empire," Vexthar continued. "Half of all resources from your worlds, half of all technology you possess. 10 million of your people for work in our labor camps. You have 72 of your hours to comply." The message ended, leaving humanity's leaders staring at silent screens. The room was quiet except for the sound of breathing and the distant hum of air conditioning. 10 million people," whispered Senator Paul Griffin. "They want 10 million of us as slaves." General Amy Rodriguez was the first to speak up. "We need to see what we're dealing with. Get me a full analysis of their fleet strength." The report came back within an hour, and it was worse than anyone had hoped. The alien ships carried enough firepower to destroy every major city on Earth. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had developed. Most disturbing of all, intelligence reports suggested this was just a small part of their empire. "They've done this before," reported Colonel Ben Taylor, humanity's chief military strategist. "We've picked up radio signals from across the galaxy. Dozens of species, maybe hundreds, all sending the same kind of surrender messages. The Zephyrians have been conquering worlds for centuries." President Brooks stood at the window of her office, looking up at the sky where alien ships now hung like dark clouds. She could see them even in daylight, black spots against the blue that reminded everyone that Earth was no longer safe. "What do other species usually do?" she asked. "They surrender," Ben replied quietly. "Every single one. The Zephyrians show up, make their demands, and within days they get complete submission. The alternative is planetary bombardment. News of the alien ultimatum spread across Earth faster than wildfire. Television stations broadcast emergency bulletins. Internet forums exploded with panic and anger. In the streets, people looked up at the sky and saw their future hanging over them like a sword. But something strange happened as the news spread. Instead of panic, something else began to grow in the human population. Factory workers stopped their machines to talk in small groups. Farmers put down their tools and called their families. Teachers gathered their students and spoke quietly about courage and freedom. On Mars, Governor Katie Wells received the same ultimatum the aliens had sent to Earth. Her response was to order every civilian into the underground shelters and every soldier to their posts. "If they want our world," she told her staff, "they'll have to take it." The asteroid miners in the belt got the message too. Foreman Tony Blake read it aloud to his crew over the communication system. When he finished, the miners were quiet for a long moment. Then someone started laughing. Soon the whole crew was laughing, not because anything was funny, but because the alternative was too terrible to think about. As the 72-hour deadline approached, humanity prepared for the most important decision in its history. The elevator descended deep into the mountain, carrying President Helen Brooks and her advisors to the most secure place on Earth. The NORAD bunker had been built to survive nuclear war, but no one had ever imagined it would host a meeting about alien invasion. General Amy Rodriguez was already waiting when they arrived. The conference room was filled with screens showing the alien fleet positions, casualty estimates, and resource calculations. Every number told the same story. Humanity was about to lose everything. "Report," President Brooks said as she took her seat at the head of the table. "It's not good," Amy replied. She pressed a button, and the main screen showed a comparison between human and alien forces. "Our entire fleet has maybe 200 ships. Most of them are cargo haulers or mining vessels with guns bolted on. The aliens have brought 50 dreadnoughts, each one bigger than our largest battleship." Dr. Chris Hamilton adjusted his glasses and pulled up technical data. "I've been analyzing their technology since they arrived. Their shields can stop anything we can throw at them. Their weapons can punch through our best armor like paper. And their ships..." He shook his head. "They don't even use rocket fuel. They bend space to move." Senator Paul Griffin leaned forward in his chair. "What about negotiation? Maybe we can work out a deal, reduce their demands, find some middle ground." "Middle ground?" Colonel Ben Taylor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They want half our resources, half our technology, and 10 million people as slaves. What's the middle ground on slavery, Senator?" The room fell quiet. Everyone knew Ben was right, but the alternative was almost too terrible to consider. Fighting. The aliens meant certain death for billions of people. President Brooks looked around the table at the faces of humanity's leaders. Some showed fear, others anger, but all of them showed the weight of an impossible decision. "What do the colonies say?" "Mars is preparing to fight," Amy reported. "Governor Katie Wells has moved all civilians underground and activated their defense grid. The asteroid miners are arming their ships. Europa Station is... well, they're trying to hide, but there's nowhere to go." On Mars, Katie Wells stood in the command center of New Shanghai, the planet's capital city. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the red dust storms that had raged for days. Above the storms, alien ships hung in the sky like dark birds, waiting to strike. "How many people did we get into the shelters?" she asked her aide. 90% of the population," came the reply. "The rest refused to leave their homes." Katie understood. Mars had been humanity's first real colony, built by people who had left Earth to make a new life among the stars. These people had carved cities out of rock and made gardens grow in alien soil. They weren't going to give it up without a fight. In the asteroid belt, Foreman Tony Blake floated in the zero gravity of his mining station. Around him, his crew worked to mount mining lasers on cargo ships. The weapons weren't designed for war, but they were all they had. "These things won't scratch their armor," said one of the miners, a woman named Sue Parker who had been cutting rocks for 15 years. "Maybe not," Tony replied. "But if we're going down swinging." Back on Earth, the debate continued in the bunker. Hours had passed and no one was any closer to a solution. The alien deadline was approaching fast and humanity still had no plan. "We could surrender," suggested Dr. Hamilton quietly. "Give them what they want. Some of us would survive." "As slaves," Ben shot back. "Our children working in their mines, our scientists building their weapons. Is that survival?" "It's better than extinction," Paul argued. "We could rebuild eventually, find a way to fight back when we're stronger." Amy pulled up historical data on her screen. "I've been studying the radio signals we've intercepted from other conquered worlds. The Zephyrians have been doing this for 700 years. They've enslaved over 300 species across the galaxy. Not one of them has ever fought back successfully." "Then we'll be the first," said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Admiral Lisa Carter entering the room. She had come down from Luna Base to join the council, her uniform still showing the dust of rapid travel. "Admiral," President Brooks said, "what's the situation in space?" "Bad," Lisa replied honestly. "But I've been thinking about something. Every species that surrendered to these aliens did it quickly, within hours or days. What if that's what they expect?" "What do you mean?" Helen asked. Lisa moved to the tactical display and pointed at the alien fleet positions. "They're not attacking. They're just sitting there waiting for us to give up. What if we don't?" "They'll destroy us," Paul said. "Maybe, but maybe not right away. They want our resources and our people. Dead planets don't pay tribute." The room was quiet as everyone considered this. It was a thin hope, but it was something. Colonel Ben Taylor studied the display. "If we're going to fight, we need to hit them fast and hard. Make them pay for every mile of space, every city, every life." "The orbital defense platforms are still operational," Amy added. "We have missile bases on the moon, defensive satellites around Earth. It's not much, but it's something." President Brooks stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the mountain valley. Even here, deep underground, she could feel the weight of the alien ships pressing down from above. "What about the people?" she asked. "What are they saying?" Her aide checked his messages. "The polls are interesting. 60% say fight even if it means death. 30% want to negotiate. 10% want to surrender completely. 60% want to fight a war they can't win," Paul said. "They want to die free," Ben corrected. As the hours passed, reports came in from around the world. Factory workers had stopped production and were building weapons in their shops. Farmers were hiding food supplies. Teachers were holding classes about courage and sacrifice. Everywhere, ordinary people were preparing for the end of the world. But something else was happening too. Messages were coming in from space, weak signals from the edge of human territory. Other species, ones that had been conquered by the Zephyrians, were watching to see what humanity would do. "There are ships out there," Lisa reported. "Hiding, in nebulae, behind asteroids. Refugees, rebels, survivors. They're all waiting to see if we'll fight." The 72-hour deadline was almost up. Soon, humanity would have to give its answer to the galaxy. The 72 hours were almost up. President Helen Brooks stood in the communication center of the NORAD bunker, looking at the camera that would broadcast humanity's answer to the galaxy. Every human settlement was watching. Every ship in space had tuned in. The alien fleet waited in silence above Earth, expecting surrender. Admiral Lisa Carter finished setting up the broadcast link. "We're connected to all human colonies and ships. The signal will reach the alien fleet in 30 seconds. Around the room, humanity's leaders waited. General Amy Rodriguez stood at attention beside the tactical displays. Colonel Ben Taylor checked his watch. They had exactly 3 minutes before the deadline expired. Dr. Chris Hamilton monitored the alien ships, watching for any sign of movement. President Brooks had spent the last hour alone, thinking about the decision that would shape humanity's future. The choice was simple, but terrible: surrender and live as slaves, or fight and probably die free. Most species chose slavery. Humanity was about to be different. The communication screen flickered to life, showing the reptilian face of High Commander Vexthar. His red eyes gleamed with confidence as he spoke from his massive dreadnought hanging over Earth. "Humans of Sol 3, the alien commander said, his voice cold and sharp like broken glass. "The time limit expires. Present your terms of surrender." President Brooks stepped forward, her back straight and her voice calm. She had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times, but now that it was here, she felt strangely peaceful. The weight of humanity's future rested on her shoulders, and she was ready to carry it. She looked directly into the camera, knowing that billions of humans were watching. She thought about the children hiding in shelters on Mars, the miners preparing to fight with mining tools, the farmers who had hidden their food rather than let aliens take it. She thought about every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom. No. The word hung in space like a physical thing. One simple syllable that contained all of humanity's defiance, hope, and courage. It was quiet, dignified, and absolutely final. High Commander Vexthar's expression changed from confidence to confusion. His reptilian features twisted as he tried to understand what he had just heard. In 7 centuries of conquest, no species had ever given such a simple, complete rejection of Zephyrian demands. "What did you say?" the alien commander demanded. President Brooks kept looking at the camera, her voice steady and clear. "I said no. Humanity rejects your demands. We will not pay tribute. We will not give you our people. We will not surrender our freedom." The alien's red eyes blazed with anger. "You do not understand. We have conquered hundreds of worlds. We have destroyed entire civilizations. Your primitive weapons cannot harm us." "Then you'll have to destroy us," Helen replied calmly, "because we will not bow." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in absolute silence. For a long moment, nobody moved or spoke. They had just declared war on an enemy that could wipe them out with ease. "Well," said Colonel Ben Taylor finally, "I guess that's that." The word "no" traveled faster than light through the galaxy's communication networks. On distant worlds where humans had never been, alien species picked up the broadcast and translated it into their own languages. In slave colonies across the Zephyrian Empire, conquered peoples heard about the small species that had refused to surrender. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, a creature called Zorak listened to the human broadcast with growing amazement. His species, the Centauri, had surrendered to the Zephyrians 50 years ago. He had been a child then, watching his parents bow their heads as alien soldiers marched through their cities. "They said no," he whispered to his fellow slaves in the deep mines. "The humans said no." Word spread through the slave barracks like fire through dry grass. Species that had forgotten the meaning of defiance suddenly remembered what it felt like to stand up straight. The Altarians, who had been planning a rebellion for decades, began sending coded messages to resistance cells across 17 systems. On the water world of Oceanus, the dolphin-like inhabitants received the human transmission in their underwater cities. They had been hiding from the Zephyrians for years, using their ocean depths to avoid detection. Now they began preparing their bioships for war. Even in the far reaches of space, the mysterious energy beings of the Void Nebula stirred at the news. They had watched the Zephyrian Empire grow for centuries, but had never interfered in the affairs of physical species. The human response changed something in their ancient minds. Back in the Sol system, the Zephyrian fleet began moving into attack positions. High Commander Vexthar was furious at the human rejection, but he was also troubled. In his long career of conquest, he had learned to recognize different types of resistance. Some species fought out of desperation, others from pride. The humans seemed different. They fought from conviction. "Supreme Admiral," he called to his superior through the quantum communication link, "the humans have refused our demands." Supreme Admiral Crethan's voice came back across the void, cold, and ancient. Refused? Explain. They gave a single-word response. They said no. There was a long pause before Crethan replied. No explanations, no negotiations, no pleas for better terms. Nothing, just no. Another pause. Crethan had been conquering worlds since before Vexthar was hatched. He had heard every kind of surrender speech, every desperate bargain, every proud last stand. But a simple no was something new. Begin the bombardment, he finally ordered. But carefully. We still need the planet intact for resource extraction. On Earth, the alien ships began to glow with weapon energy. In the NORAD bunker, alarms started screaming as sensors detected the power buildup. All ships, this is Admiral Carter, Lisa broadcast to the human fleet. You know what we're fighting for. Make it count. Captain Jake Morrison received the message on the bridge of the UES Defiance. Around him, his crew prepared for battle they couldn't win. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Claire Foster pushed the reactors to maximum power. At the weapons console, Lieutenant Kevin Stone armed every missile they had. Today we find out what we're made of, Jake told his crew over the ship's communication system. Whatever happens, remember that we chose to stand up. That's something they can't take away from us. Across human space, the same scene played out on dozens of ships. Miners turned their vessels into makeshift warships. Colony defense forces powered up weapons that had never been fired in anger. On every world and every station, humanity prepared to prove that some things were worth dying for. The galaxy watched and waited. For the first time in 700 years, someone had told the Zephyrian Empire no. Now everyone would learn what that word really cost. The word no traveled across the galaxy faster than anyone had expected. On the slave world of Kepler 442b, Zorak huddled with his fellow Centauri workers in the deep mines where the Zephyrian guards rarely went. The tunnels echoed with whispered conversations in a dozen different languages. The humans really said it, whispered Velana, an elderly Centauri female who remembered freedom. After all these years, someone finally said no. Other species had gathered too. The insect-like Vorthon clicked their mandibles in what passed for excitement among their kind. The crystal beings from Sigma Draconis hummed in harmonies that made the tunnel walls vibrate. Even the plant people of New Eden rustled their leaves in patterns that meant hope. What happens now? Asked a young Vorthon whose name translated roughly as Swiftclaw. Now we see if the humans can back up their words, and Zorak replied. But deep inside he felt something he had not experienced in 50 years. Hope. The news spread through the underground networks that connected slave worlds across the galaxy. Messages passed through quantum relay stations hidden in normal cargo, shipments and carried by traveling merchants who served as secret messengers. The Altarian resistance, led by a mysterious figure known only as the Phoenix, began coordinating with rebel groups they had never contacted before. On the water world of Oceanus, deep beneath the planet's endless seas, the dolphin-like Aquarians received the human transmission in their biomechanical cities. Elder Titlesong called an emergency gathering of the Deep Council, something that had not happened in over a century. The surface dwellers have chosen to fight, she announced to the assembled leaders. The young species called humans has rejected the Zephyrian demands. And what concern is this of ours? Asked Current Rider, who had always favored isolation. We are safe in our depths. Let the landwalkers fight their wars. But Wave Speaker, the youngest member of the council, disagreed. If the humans fall, how long before the Zephyrians develop technology to reach us down here? They have conquered the void between stars. The deep ocean will not stop them forever. The debate went on for hours, but eventually the council reached a decision. For the first time since they had hidden from the Zephyrian expansion, the Aquarians would send ships to help another species fight. Even stranger things were happening in the Void Nebula, where energy beings older than most stars dwelled in forms that physical species could barely understand. They had watched the rise and fall of civilizations for millions of years, never interfering in the affairs of matter-based life forms. But something about the human response stirred memories in their ancient consciousness. They remembered when they too had been young and physical, when they had faced extinction and chosen to fight rather than submit. The human word no resonated through dimensions that solid beings could not perceive. One of the eldest beings, known to physical species as the bright voice of thunder, spoke to its companions across vast distances of space and time. Perhaps it is time to act. Back in the Sol system, the Zephyrian High Command was struggling with a problem they had never faced before. High Commander Vexthar stood in the war room of his flagship, staring at reports that made no sense. "Explain this to me again," he demanded of his intelligence officer. "Sir, we are detecting unusual activity across 17 different systems. Old communication networks are coming online. Ships that have been hiding for decades are moving. Resistance groups that we thought were destroyed are making contact with each other." Vexthar's red eyes narrowed. "And this started when?" "Immediately after the human transmission, sir. The word is spreading through every slave population in the Empire." Supreme Admiral Creathan materialized as a hologram in the war room, his ancient face showing concern for the first time in centuries. "Commander, report on the human situation." "The humans refuse to surrender, Admiral. They are preparing to fight with everything they have." "And their chances of victory?" "None, sir. Our preliminary bombardment will destroy their orbital defenses within hours. Their fleet cannot possibly challenge ours." But Creathan was not satisfied. "Then why do I have reports of rebellion stirring across the entire Empire? Why are species that surrendered decades ago suddenly remembering how to fight?" Vexthar had no answer. In 700 years of conquest, the Zephyrian Empire had never seen anything like this. Usually when they destroyed a defiant species, it served as an example that kept other worlds in line. But the humans seemed to be having the opposite effect. On Earth, Lieutenant Commander Susan Price worked frantically in the communications center of the UES Discovery. Her job was to monitor deep space transmissions, but what she was seeing defied explanation. "Captain Morris, you need to see this," she called to her commanding officer. Captain Dan Morris looked at the display showing dozens of weak signals from across the galaxy. "What am I looking at?" "Messages, sir. Coded transmissions between star systems that haven't communicated in years. And they're all talking about us." "About us?" "About humanity's response to the Zephyrians. Sir, I think we started something." The implications were staggering. Humanity's simple no had not just defied the Zephyrian Empire, it had inspired enslaved species across the galaxy to remember their own courage. For the first time in centuries, the Empire faced the possibility of widespread rebellion, but the immediate concern was still the alien fleet hanging over Earth. The Zephyrian ships had finished charging their weapons and were beginning their attack runs. The first targets would be Earth's orbital defense platforms, followed by the lunar bases and then the planet's major cities. In the asteroid belt, Foreman Tony Blake watched the alien formation through his mining station sensors. His converted cargo ships were no match for Zephyrian dreadnoughts, but they were positioned to attack the alien supply lines. "Remember," he told his crews over the radio, "we're not trying to win. We're trying to buy time and make them pay for every inch." On Mars, Governor Katie Wells received word that the first Zephyrian troop transports were heading for her world. The planet's defense grid was ready, and every tunnel entrance was mined with explosives. If the aliens wanted Mars, they would have to dig the humans out one shelter at a time. "All units, this is Governor Wells," she broadcast to her defenders. "Today we show the galaxy what humans are made of. Make every shot count." But the most significant development was happening in the deepest parts of space, where ancient powers that had slept for millennia began to stir. The energy beings of the Void Nebula were moving toward inhabited systems for the first time in recorded history. The bioships of Oceanus were rising from depths no alien scanner had ever penetrated. And across the Zephyrian Empire, slave populations were beginning to whisper a new word in their own languages. The word was no. The galaxy had heard humanity's defiance, and it was beginning to remember what freedom meant. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled through fear for 7 centuries, suddenly faced something it had never encountered before, hope spreading faster than their fleets could travel. The battle for humanity was about to begin, but it would not be humanity fighting alone. The battle began at sunrise on Earth's fourth day under siege. High Commander Vexthar gave the order from his flagship, and 50 Zephyrian dreadnoughts opened fire at once. Their energy beams cut through space like burning swords aimed at Earth's orbital defense platforms. Captain Jake Morrison watched the first human station explode in a ball of fire and debris. The UES Defiance shook as pieces of metal bounced off their hull. Around him, his crew worked frantically to return fire with weapons that seemed like toys compared to alien technology. "All ships, attack formation, Charlie," Jake ordered into his communication device. "We're going in." The human fleet charged toward the alien armada like ants attacking elephants. Captain Dan Morris in the UES Discovery led 12 ships in a desperate assault on the alien left flank. Captain Sue Parker commanded the converted mining vessels from the asteroid belt, their improvised weapons blazing as they dove between the massive enemy ships. But humanity was not fighting alone. As the battle raged around Earth, strange, new ships began appearing throughout the solar system. They materialized from hyperspace jumps, rose from the deep oceans of Earth, and emerged from hiding places among the asteroids. The first to arrive were the Aquarians from Oceanus. Their bioships looked like giant jellyfish made of living metal, pulsing with organic light as they moved through space. Wavespeaker commanded the lead vessel, speaking to her crew in the flowing language of her people. "For too long we have hidden in the depths," she declared. "Today we swim in the void to help those who dare to stand." The Aquarian ships moved unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. They flowed through space like water, their bioweapons, firing streams of energy that ate through alien armor like acid. 3 Zephyrian cruisers found themselves surrounded by the jellyfish ships and were destroyed before they could react. High Commander Vexithar watched in shock as his fleet came, under attack from multiple directions. "Where are these ships coming from?" he demanded. His sensor officer's voice was filled with confusion. "Unknown, sir. These vessel types are not in our database. And, sir, we're getting reports from across the Empire. Rebellions are breaking out on 17 worlds simultaneously." The reports were true. On Kepler 442b, Zorak led his fellow slaves in an uprising that caught their Zephyrian guards completely by surprise. The Centauri had been planning this moment for 50 years, hiding weapons and organizing resistance cells. When they heard about humanity's defiance, they knew the time had come. "For freedom!" Zorak shouted as he and 100 other slaves overwhelmed the guard tower. Within hours, they had seized control of the mining complex and were broadcasting calls for rebellion to other slave worlds. The Altarian resistance, led by the Phoenix, launched coordinated attacks on Zephyrian supply bases across 17 systems. Ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and nebulae suddenly emerged to strike at the Empire's weak points. The Phoenix herself led the assault on the main supply depot at Rigel Station. "The humans have shown us the way," she announced to her followers. "Now we show the galaxy that the age of Zephyrian rule is ending." But the strangest sight of all was in the Void Nebula, where the energy beings had taken physical form for the first time in millions of years. They appeared as creatures of pure light, shifting between dimensions as they moved toward the battle. Bright Voice of Thunder led them, its consciousness spanning vast distances of space. The energy beings struck without warning, their forms passing through Zephyrian shields as if they did not exist. They attacked the alien ships from inside, disrupting power systems and causing massive explosions. 5 Zephyrian dreadnoughts simply vanished, as the energy beings unmade them at the molecular level. Back at Earth, the tide of battle was slowly turning. The human fleet was taking terrible losses, but they were making the aliens pay for every victory. Captain Jake Morrison's ship was badly damaged, its hull cracked and systems failing, but he kept fighting. "Engineering, give me everything you've got," he called to Chief Engineer Claire Foster. "Captain, if I push the engines any harder, we'll explode," she replied. "Better than surrendering," Jake answered. The UES Defiance made one final attack run on Vexthar's flagship, firing every weapon it had. The alien dreadnought's shields flared and failed under the combined assault of human determination and alien rebellion technology that the Aquarians had shared. On the surface of Earth, the fighting was just as fierce. Zephyrian troops had landed, in major cities, expecting quick surrender from primitive humans. Instead, they found themselves fighting block by block against defenders who refused to give up. Sergeant Linda Hayes led her squad through the ruins of New York, using the rubble as cover while they picked off alien soldiers. "They want our city?" she shouted to her troops. "Make them earn every street." In the Rocky Mountains, Corporal Kevin Stone and his mountain fighters used their knowledge of the terrain to ambush alien patrols. The Zephyrians had technology, but humans had something more valuable. They were fighting for their home. The turning point came when Supreme Admiral Creton himself arrived to take command of the failing invasion. His massive command ship was larger than any vessel humanity had ever seen, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. But as it entered the Sol system, it was met by an impossible sight. Ships from dozens of species filled the space around Earth. Centauri fighters flew alongside human corvettes. Aquarian bioships moved in formation with Altarian cruisers. Energy beings darted between the fleets like living lightning. For the first time in 700 years, the galaxy was united against the Zephyrian Empire. "This is impossible," Creton whispered as he stared at the display. How did they coordinate this? The answer was simple. Humanity's word no had traveled faster than any fleet, inspiring courage in species that had forgotten how to fight. The rebellion had been building for decades, but it took human defiance to light the fuse. The battle raged for 3 days. When it ended, Vexthar's flagship was burning in Earth's atmosphere, and Creton's command ship was retreating toward the edge of the solar system. The mighty Zephyrian fleet, which had never been defeated, limped away from human space like a wounded animal. President Helen Brooks stood among the ruins of the Capitol building, looking up at the sky where human ships now patrolled alongside their new alien allies. The cost had been terrible. Millions dead, entire cities destroyed, fleets reduced to scrap metal. But humanity had earned something more precious than safety. They had earned respect. As news of the Zephyrian defeat spread across the galaxy, more rebellions broke out. Species that had been enslaved for centuries remembered what freedom felt like. The empire that had ruled through fear for 700 years began to crumble as world after world declared independence. And it all started with a single word spoken by a small species on the edge of nowhere. A word that meant more than any weapon or technology. No, the galaxy would never be the same.